Licensing Committee meeting. Moving on to item number 1. Apologies for absence and substitutions, please. Councillor Ellis.
Yes, apologies for lateness from Councillor Roxanne Ellis, who should be here shortly.
Okay, we'll wait a little bit then before we start on the main substantive part of it. Councillor Smith, thank you.
Yeah, and as before, apologies from Councillor Pickering.
Thank you. While we're waiting, I will go through items 2 and 3, which shouldn't actually affect Roxanne's attendance. So to move to item 2, that's to approve as a correct record the minutes having been circulated of the meeting held on 6th August 2024. May I have a proposer, please? Councillor Palin, seconder. Councillor Wilkinson, those 4. Any abstentions? Thank you. Item number 3. Are there any declarations of interest? There are not. Thank you. I think we're going to continue. Okay, so moving on to item number 4. This is the proposed general licensing fees for 2024. Sam Palmer, who is the Food, Health and Safety and Housing Manager, is going to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. So, as mentioned, here to present the proposed general licensing fees for 24-25. The purpose of the report is to set out the fees and charges and to seek approval for their introduction. The recommendations are to approve the revised general licensing fees, which are attached in Appendix 1, and these for the activities of massage and special treatment, animal welfare licensing activities and mobile homes, park homes regulation, and the recommendations are to approve the price revisions. The background of the report is set out in the agenda pack, sets out the background to how we introduce the licensing fees, along with the financial implications and the legal implications. So it's all pretty self-explanatory. It's sort of an annual report that we bring to committee. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions? Councillor Palin, please.
I've been sitting here trying to think if it's a real question or not. Nail bars are not included in this list, are they? But many of the nail bars have massage chairs for a pedicure especially, and they're very comfortable, but I wondered if there might be any need for them to be considered as part of the massage parlour regime. I don't know of any reason why a member of the public might be damaged by using a chair, which is a possibility when you go for a full massage, which is why that needs to be. So I just wondered if it was worth raising. I'm sorry if it's not.
I can take that away and have a look at it. I mean, the chairs themselves that provide massage, they won't need licensing. The purpose of the licensing is for the physical contact from the masseur to the customer. I don't think it would solely apply just to a foot massage, if you're having a pedicure as such. But I can take that away and just double check that for you. It's no problem.
Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. The owners of these businesses have been through very, very difficult times, and they're continuing to go through difficult times. I'm very concerned that, again, we're increasing the charges to them, making possibly some of them unviable. There doesn't seem to be a set percentage increase, and I know you've mentioned in the report, but the horse riding establishments have been really hit hard. So I'm disappointed to read that. Are we making money out of these, or are we covering our costs? Because if not, how come we're more expensive than others? For instance, is Mansfield running their licensing fees at a loss, or is Rushcliffe making huge profits and we're not?
Okay, thank you. The fees broadly have been increased around about 5%, but we've done a full review. Each fee that's set out in Appendix 1, we cost the process from start to finish, from receipt of application through to issuing the licence, and we apportion costs for each step of that activity. And that's used to justify the fees, and it's kept under regular review. Other councils may justify their fees in different ways. One of the main differences is our overheads are apportioned, so the way we apportion them may be different to other councils, may have different running costs, for example. In terms of the income received, we're not making a surplus on any of these licences that are subject to this report. We actually run a slight deficit. It costs us more to administer those licences than it does to actually provide the service. So yeah, we're not making a profit, we're not making money out of this process. It is purely based on the cost of administering the licence that we have to process.
Could you just clarify the reasoning behind the huge increase for horse riding establishments, then, please?
So we originally set these fees that would have been set last year, and then we've reviewed the time that it takes to process them. So, I mean, we're looking at, it's about £85 increase, isn't it? Which they're quite lengthy. One of the costs that we incur when processing horse riding establishments is the vet cost as well. We have to bring a vet along to do the inspections. So some of their costs linked to it. We also, the higher fees, we split the licenses in, we assess them based on compliance. So there's a star rating scheme for animal welfare licensing, and they range from 1 to 5 stars. So 1 star are the least compliant, 5 stars are the most compliant. So you'll see the 1-year licenses are for your 1-star businesses, and your 5 stars generally get a 3-year license. So, the price increase for the larger ones is, for the longer licenses, the 3-year license is less, because we're doing less work to assess them because they're more compliant.
Happy, Councillor Smith?
Happy with the explanation. Certainly if I was a small business owner, I certainly wouldn't be happy with the increases, and I don't think I'd be happy with the current charges anyway. I will believe what you say quite rightly, that we aren't making a huge profit, if at all, on this, and the costs are justified. So thank you for the explanation.
Thank you. Councillor Scroggy, please.
Yeah, I've just got a question regarding page 15. The second line down, it says, second box down, it says special treatment involving massage sole trader renewal. That seems to have decreased. Is that an error, or is that?
So that is a new fee that we've introduced for sole traders for that reason. They take less time, less cost to administer those licenses compared to a salon that's like a business on the high street that maybe has 4 or 5 different rooms that they're providing massage in. The sole traders, normally it's done at the person's house, and they may do it in a converted room or in a bedroom or what have you. So there's less cost incurred in terms of processing their license. The premises are smaller. It's a far more straightforward process.
Councillor Scroggy?
Yep, thank you for that. Right, the next question I've got is going back to the horse riding establishments. You mentioned there that the cost of the vets. Does Gedling Borough Council use a specialist vet, or do we have an approved list of vets that we use?
Yeah, so we have an approved list of vets that need to be qualified in the equine kind of industry. So they're approved by a director through our delegated powers.
And are they local to Gedling? Are they based in Gedling Borough?
I haven't got the details to hand. I'll gladly supply you details of which vets we use, but they're not. There'll be the vets that we can access to come out and do the inspections.
Right. I'm just wondering, is that why there's such a big increase in the price, because of the cost to the vets? The cost to the vets have went up.
I think it's purely down to the process, you know, the length of time it takes to administer the licence, the steps that are involved, the process that we're required to go through to make sure they meet the different star ratings on the scheme.
Okay. Thank
I mean,
you.
these have all been reviewed. We've gone through these with a fine-tooth comb with our finance colleagues to check that we are properly setting the fees at the right level. So I'm confident that they've been checked and that we're happy with the justification that we've got to be able to put them into the report. And conscious that we're setting these fees in September. There's a number of weeks and months work gone into this, preparing this report. In an ideal world, we would have said it earlier in the year, but we wanted to make sure it was right so that it's ready for committee to approve.
And you said these are constantly under review, so if you find that the cost goes down at a stage, it could decrease next year.
Potentially, yes. Yeah. So I think next year the idea is to put a whole range of fees and charges into a whole report for the council. So they're going to be in one report. But we're starting the process of setting them already.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. May I ask, please, just going back to the horse riding issue, I noticed that the actual application stroke renewal fee has gone up plus £80. But the grant of the licence fee is actually reduced by £53 on year one. So the actual overall increase is £28. And the same applies for two. The actual increase is £41, and for the 3-year licence it's £28. So that just gives a little bit more perspective on the fee setting. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah,
Thank you.
the fee's set in two parts. So there's the application fee, the cost of administering the application, and then there's the running cost of the scheme, which includes a spot check as well during the lifetime of the visit of the licence.
Thank you. Are there any other further questions? No? Lovely. Can we move on then, please, to get the right bit of paper? The recommendations. So may I have a proposer, please, for recommendations A and B to approve the revised general licensing fees and charges attached at Appendix 1 and to approve the price revisions to be introduced from tomorrow. Okay, so those four. Thank you. Against? And abstentions, please. Thank you very much. And a change of personnel. Thank you, Sam. May I also say, before Sam goes, and in relation to the Licensing Act Committee and what's about to come up, a massive thank you to the officers. These, what's to come and the two items that we've already looked at today are really quite huge pieces of work, and they've been produced, over the summer. Well, we're here, we're doing it, we're getting on with it, and thanks to them for an excellent job. Okie dokie, so now we're moving on to item number 5, which is pavement licences, and this will be presented by Mr. Neelan, Head of Public Protection.
Thank you, Chair. So members will be aware that at the meeting held on the 11th of June, it was resolved to delegate the functions under Part 1 of the Business and Planning Act 2020 as amended by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023. At that time, no policy was in place and there was no fee structure in place. So, as Chair has said, over the summer, officers have been working on that policy and drawing up a scale of fees and charges. The recommendation is that members approve the pavement licensing policy, which is attached at Appendix 1 on page 33. and members approve the pavement licensing structure, which is the first time that this fee structure has been put in place, which can be seen at page 31. If there's any questions.
Councillor Scroggy, please.
This went out to public consultation, didn't it? I believe, yes, it did. Can you tell me how many responses the council had to the consultation?
No, it didn't go out to consultation. No, we took legal advice and the policy didn't need to go out for consultation.
It didn't need to go out to consultation?
No.
Right.
Welcome, Councillor Ellis. Thank you.
I don't know if anybody else has got another question. Don't want to hog the limelight.
Councillor Wilkinson?
It's probably more a point than a question, although it may end up being a little bit of a question at the end. I mean, I do welcome this. I think it's, it's really good that we are, adopting more of the cafe culture that our neighbours on the European continent follow. So I think overall it's a good thing. I do have the odd concern that sometimes walking down Front Street, for example, can be a little bit intimidating when all the bars are going at full pelt, and I very much hope. I know the policy says that the nuisance will be reviewed, but I hope that any intimidation that people do feel is constantly kept under review and addressed. But overall, I very much welcome this and thank the officers for bringing this forward.
So, thank you very much for that. We as officers reflected on this morning, and we think it's a really positive thing, because I think for the first time ever it really consolidates the work of pavement cafe licences, and it gives us a real opportunity to be able to have a bit more feel as though we've got a bit more say, particularly in the local environment and places like Front Street. Historically, pavement cafe licences were very much done to us, but it's given us an opportunity now to work with the local businesses. It's kind of a ludicrous position if you think that the licensing authority has so much say about the inside of the premises, but a few feet away we have no regulatory control or no say on it whatsoever. And I can think of 2 or 3 cases already where officers have worked quite closely with the businesses to almost design through a number of premises what the street scene looks like. You've alluded to Front Street. That was partly done by the County Council, partly done by Gedling Borough Council, and some of it is on private land. So that just indicates the kind of tapestry of pavement licences that we've been dealing with. And moving forward, I think it's an opportunity for us to put our mark on it, and I think that's a really positive thing. The pricing structure we've got is based on estimates, because I think that there is some businesses out there which we probably don't know about, and there are some issues of enforcement that we might not be aware of. So whilst we've done a bit of a time and motion study to get where we are with it, it could be that it does change, as you quite rightly pointed out, depending on the amount of input that we have on this regime moving forward. But no, officers agree with members, it's a good thing.
Yeah, another quick question. Currently, how much does it cost the council to process, let's say, a 2-year licence or a 1-year licence?
So when we got the temporary legislation in COVID, the cap for the fee was £100. We did get a couple of extra payments from the government. But overall, I don't know how much it cost us annually. Overall, we didn't do those calculations because we knew that the fee was capped, and we charged the £100 for each application. But obviously, we've done this time and motion study with finance, and it has come out above the 100. So I'm guessing we were possibly operating at a deficit, but I don't know how it equates with the extra payments we got to sort of back that up from the government. So I think there was a budget somewhere where we got some bulk payments to sort of backfill what it was costing the council over the last 4 years. But my guess, looking at the calculations from finance, we probably were operating at a bit of a deficit on this.
So can I just come in on that as well? This new regime is slightly different to the COVID regime as well, because under the COVID legislation, we didn't have any enforcement powers. So there was no cost of enforcement because we couldn't really do anything other than revoke the licence. There now is, and I think it's out within the report, there is potential enforcement. You know, Kevin's team could pull up in a van and confiscate the furniture, you know, as a last resort. But there is certainly a lot more engagement going to be required by officers, which will obviously take time, and there will be a cost to that.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong, I welcome the policy, but you know, the new regime, as you mentioned it, but my council ward in particular is a major high street in the borough that utilises street furniture for the businesses. So I just want to be sure for the shops in my area that, you know, I want to be thorough with this. I don't want to rush it.
May I
Just-
respond to that? From what I know, the cap was at £100.
Yeah.
It's now been raised to £500, the government cap. But other licences now, for a new two-year licence, that's £290, which works out at £2.78 a week. For a new one-year licence, it's £260. So obviously the work is in that initial
Well, yeah, but I think
visit.
what we need to remember, Chair, is that for a good part of the year, it's winter months in the borough, so people won't be using it.
Yes.
So, you know, they're paying that amount of money for probably 5, 6, 7 months, well, maybe half of the year. So, you know, I just want to be sure. But can I just get on record as well? You mentioned private land, so particularly in Carlton Hill, there's a few shops up there. You know, the DIY shop, they've got their own land at front. This doesn't fall under that remit, does it?
No, it doesn't. And I think you're quite right. We did pick up on, as I said, the various tapestries across the borough of the different types of licence. So if it's on private land, it's not licensed. If it's on county land previously, that would have been issued by the county council and enforced by them. And then when we moved through COVID, some of it fell to us, but we didn't get the enforcement powers. I think this is starting to consolidate it. You've raised the fees. I think some of the pavement cafe licences that we've had out there, which we've issued, have been out right through the year, with the exception of the harshest of weathers. But I think there is a hardy bunch of people who are prepared to sit outside, and you know, if there's a spare table outside and none inside, they'll probably take up on it. You just remind me what your ward was, Councillor Scroggy?
Carlton Hill ward.
Oh, right, yeah. So that's an area which I would see would benefit from this legislation, and I think that it would probably improve the economy for the local businesses, and I think there would be probably visual improvements as well. And in my mind, I'm just looking at Carlton Hill and the pavements, the seating arrangements that's already in there. I would see it be a benefit for this area.
Okay.
Chairman, could I just add to that? Just to add, you mentioned a DIY premises. This is purely for food and drink premises, so anything else would still come under the county council. So if anybody wanted to display goods outside that weren't related to a food and drink premises, that would still be the county council.
That was probably a bad example then.
I just
The
thought I'd
shop's
clarify.
great, I must say. I'll plug the shop because it's a business Carlton Hill. It's a cracking DIY shop up on Carlton Hill.
But I have had a look at Carlton Hill in anticipation of the list that we're going to get from the county. And it really is, as Kevin's pointed out, a tapestry of parts of private land. There's land that we own that's maintained by the Highway Authority. There's highway land. So it's going to be an interesting highway to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis, you've been waiting a while. Rachel Ellis.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to pick up on some of the themes that have developed in this discussion. And one is the tapestry of who owns which piece of land. And the other is the comment about while I certainly welcome the cafe culture, sometimes when you've got cafes sort of on two sides, I'm thinking Front Street again, of a pedestrianised area. I mean, this is called pavement licence, but you've then got the highway, which has been pedestrianised, and there is a tendency for cafes to sort of encroach on highway land. Would this cover that encroachment, or would the cafes have to apply for a highways, for a county council licence as well?
So this legislation only covers pavement licensing on highways for food and drink premises. So any licence we give, the land that it's on has to be highway land under a certain section of the Highway Act. They have to provide a plan of the area that they want to have licensed. And should they encroach any further out from that area, then that would be a matter that we could enforce on, and we would probably engage with the business, remind them of the area that is licensed. So far, we haven't had anybody who has done that. So all the licenses that are out there are operated within that plan on the highway. Now, what we also do is we have to consult with the Highway Authority on every application. That's part of the legislation. So if they do have any concerns or comments, we can take those into account when making the decision on whether to grant it. So they are definitely the first port of call for our consultation. In addition to that, we choose to consult with the police, we consult with the town centre managers, we consult with planning, and there are a couple of others, just to make sure that everybody is happy with the emergency services access. There is also quite a lot of information about the distances between obstructions on the highway, and what kind of vehicles can pass in order to not to make sure that accessibility for people in mobility, scooters, and for wheelchair accessible. So we do consult that guidance as well before we make a decision. But obviously we can always review a licence if the area around it changes. We recently had a case where a business had a pavement licence, and while they were closed for refurbishment, a different business opened that was actually a florist who then wanted to display their goods. They got a licence from the county council, so when the business came back to us for their pavement licence, we had to reassess what was happening in that local area. So the highway's always sort of changing, and we do take into account other businesses and their needs as well.
So just to clarify then, although it is a pavement licence, by agreement and by consultation with a submitted plan, the tables, chairs, etc., could go into an area which previously was the thoroughfare before it was pedestrianised.
There's a certain category under the Highway Act, and there's a list of areas that we can licence. So if it's under that category in the Highway Act, so it's considered to be the highway under that category, they're the only areas we can licence. If there's any kind of overlap into a private area or an area owned by our council, then that would require permission from those people. So the only part that we can licence is if it's under this category under the Highway Act 1980. Am I understanding your question?
Yeah, I'm just saying if you're talking about Carlton Hill, for example, there's no way that a cafe can encroach onto the roadway because obviously it would obstruct traffic, okay? But when you've got a pedestrianised area such as Front Street, then you've got a continuous paved area. And I was just querying whether in fact it is agreed that businesses can actually put their tables, chairs, etc. in the area which used to be the roadway.
There's a section in the legislation that doesn't allow any pavement licence where there is vehicle access. So they wouldn't be able to put anything where there's going to be vehicle access. Front Street is slightly different because I know there is vehicle access, but very limited. So that would still be classed as highway under this legislation.
Thank you. This is well overdue. As one of the councillors that represents the area, which includes Front Street, we've had many issues over the years with the different areas belong to different authorities, and it's all been an absolute chaos. The issues that I've seen is that, especially in the disability, in the Equalities Impact Report, disability doesn't seem to be paying any attention to those with visual disabilities, especially those who use canes. I know there was something in there about barriers having 200 millimetres from the ground, but that doesn't include things like signs, and it doesn't insist that we have barriers around CTAs, which I know Guide Dogs for the Blind ask that that is done. There also seems to be only issues with elderly disabled people in the Equalities report. It doesn't refer to people of younger age who also may be mobility impaired. I say the main issue for me, though, is that we do not seem to be paying any attention to those with visual disabilities, and I would hope that we would consult with them before we put any policy like this in place.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Do you want to come back on that either of you?
Thank you for that, Councillor Ellis. We'll revisit the quality impact assessment and make sure that it brings in those characteristics as well. Thank you.
Was there something to do with the barriers and there being a tap rail at the bottom of the barriers?
Yes, so we wouldn't issue a pavement licence without barriers. They have to have barriers. It has to have, again, it's the mobility and accessibility guidance. It has to have a tap rail. It has to be a metre. So the barriers that sometimes you see that just have a rope, they're not going to be acceptable under this licensing regime.
What about signs such as A-frames, which are we've already been asked by Guide Dogs for the Blind to ask the businesses not to use them, and they still continue to?
So A-boards aren't covered by this legislation because they're not for the purposes of consuming food and drink. So A-boards would still be licensed under the county council, so it would be that authority that would need to have a look at that. And I know that there are businesses that do put them out without the correct licence.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Smith?
Yes, obviously there's been a number of comments which from all councillors where we all broadly welcome this and thank you to officers for putting it together. Comment was made about we may possibly have been running at a loss, and we understand why, and these fees obviously reflect our costs, but also comments have been made about enforcement and inspection. I'm hoping that some of these that the increase in fees will pay for additional officer time. We know that our enforcement officers work incredibly hard. There aren't many of them, and they've got, by the looks of it, they're going to have more to do. Will we be able to fund more support from those who are already working very, very hard without all this extra work being added to their working day?
Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Smith. The enforcement across the board of a number of licensing regimes is under consideration at the moment, as you quite rightly pointed out. There's been a number of extra burdens on the service, and there's been a number of expectations from the public about the level of enforcement and reassurance they want from a number of trades. That's been considered, and we are looking at the moment about what the structure of the service will look like and what other resources we can put into it to support things like this and offer members reassurance about some of the points that's been raised this evening. So pretty much work in progress is my answer to that one, but thank you very much for pointing that out.
Is there anything further? Lovely. Okie dokie. Then we'll move to the recommendation, please. So I'd like a proposer for points 1 and 2 and a seconder that members approve the pavement licensing policy attached to Appendix 1. and that the fee structure is approved that's contained in the report. So may I have a proposer, please? Councillor Wilkinson, and a seconder? Councillor Nayuk, thank you. Okay, and those for? That's unanimous, thank you very much. There are no other items the Chair considers urgent. So at this point, we'll go to item 7, which is the exclusion of the press and public. So I move that under section 100, subsection A, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public and press be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the ensuing report on the grounds that the report involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 7 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Payne then. Those for. That's unanimous. Thank you very much.